Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be learning how to make a slider using Framer Motion and React. Now, last week I made this demo of Apple Music in the browser using Framer Motion, and it was really fun. There's lots of cool little details here, but one of the funnest parts to get right were these two sliders down here, and there's lots of little details in them, and so I wanted to take today's video to explain exactly how I did that. Now, I'm going to post a link to this demo so you can check it out. It's public, and the source code is also public, but I think by the end of this video, you're going to have a better idea of how all these parts work. You'll be able to look at that code, see some more details, and make some sliders of your own. So we're going to come over here to a brand new app, and we're going to build this thing from scratch. So let's get started. Now, the first thing we want to do is get the background of our slider. So let's add a div with background gray 300, width full. Let's give it a height of 2. Let's go ahead and make it rounded. And this is going to be kind of the background for our slider. Now, next, let's make a little knob. So we'll make this background red 500. Let's give it a width of 6 and a height of 6. It's also going to be rounded full. And there we go. We have our little handle. So to position these, let's go ahead and wrap these in a div. We'll make our background absolute. And we'll make this guy relative so that these things stack on top of each other. And let's go ahead and make it flex, flex call, and justify center so they line up right in the middle. And finally, we'll throw a relative here on the handle so it stacks out in front. So we can see kind of our slider coming into shape here. Now, when I was working on this, I found it helpful to add some data test IDs here. We'll call this slider. We'll call this slider background. And we'll call this slider handle. And we're off to a good start. Now, let's go ahead and hide the nav bar. And to make the handle actually draggable, well, this is where Framer Motion comes in. So this is pretty cool. We just turn this into emotion.div, which we can import from Framer Motion. And this is going to let us add a drag prop. And as soon as we do that, check this out. We can drag this thing all over the place. But we only want to be able to drag it left and right. So drag can take an X value, and that will restrict its dragging horizontally here. Now we also see it has some momentum. We can turn that off with drag momentum, so it just comes to an immediate stop. And then next we see we can drag it past the bar. And to fix this, we just need to wrap our handle in a div. We're going to create a new constraints ref, which is just going to be a good old React ref. And then we'll drop this on this div right here. And then we can pass in a drag constraints prop that takes in our constraints ref. And just like that, the handle sticks to the edges. Now the default behavior here lets it kind of go past and come back. To fix that, we can add drag elastic of 0. And this is kind of that standard slider behavior that we want. So that's pretty awesome, and Framer Motion is doing a bunch of work here for us. Love how easy and declarative all these APIs are. Okay, so now that we have our handle dragging, we actually want to get some values out of it so that we can notify React that there's some new values. We can update some state. So let's start by creating a value and set value use state here. And below our slider, we can render our value. And we basically want to update that value as we drag the handle. And the way we do this is with the onDrag function here. So this runs every time we drag. If we log this, pop open the console, then we'll see we get that callback. And so we need to implement a handle drag function, which will pass in right here and do our calculations. Now, there's a few different approaches you could do to do this. I found the easiest way to do it was actually, if we drop down the opacity of our handle, to use the midpoint of our handle for all of our calculations. So basically, if we're over here, we want to use the midpoint and say that that's 0, that corresponds to 0. And then when we get all the way to the right, that would correspond to 100 or whatever the max value is for our slider. So to help us do this, I'm actually going to make another div, and we'll call this data test slider progress. And this is also going to be absolute width full. Let's give it a height of 1. And for now, just a background of blue. But instead of width full, we're going to inset it in half the width of our handle so that it starts right here in the midpoint. So to make this easier, let's go ahead and pull our handle width and height out into a variable. We can see these are 24 pixels. So we can say let handle size is equal to 24. Instead of width of 6 and height of 6, we're just going to put these on a style tag. Width is handle size and height is handle size. So that all stays the same. But now our progress, instead of being the full width, it can have its own left property, which is going to be the handle size over 2, as well as a right property. And so now we can see it kind of insets in based on the width of the handle. And this is going to make our calculations really easy. We can just calculate the midpoint of the handle as it relates to that blue bar. So now let's go ahead and I'm going to paste the code in here and let's walk through each step. So whenever we drag, the first thing we want to do is figure out where the middle of this slider is. And to do that, we're going to use another ref. We'll call it the handle ref. We'll come down and slap this right on our handle. And now we can use the getBoundingClientRect API to get the bounds. And if you've never used this before, I can show you right here in the console. I have that handle selected, and I can say getBoundingClientRect. This is going to give us all the information about where this is in the page, its width, but importantly for us, its X position. So if I move it all the way to the left, we'll see the X starts out at 32. That's again because right here, the left-hand side of the element is 32 pixels from the left side of the screen. So it starts at the very beginning of the element. And if we go all the way to the end, it goes to 444. So in order to get the X position of the middle of our handle, we're going to take that X value and then add half the width of the handle. So again, if we move this back here and take a look, this is going to be 32 pixels. That's going to put us right here. And then we want to add half of the width to get to the midpoint. And so we add half of the width using this. Now we could use the handle size for the width, but later if we start scaling this, we'll actually want to use the current width. And so it's nice to just do this all based on the client rect. Okay, so that gives us the middle of the handle. Now let's go ahead and get the progress bar bounds. So for that, we'll need another ref, progress bar ref, and we can slap this onto our progress div, progress bar ref. And so now we have all the information about that blue bar. And to get the progress, we just need to compare the middle of the handle's X position, which is going to be right here. And then we want to subtract off all the distance from the left side of the screen to the beginning of the blue bar. And that's going to get us the position of the slider relative to the blue bar. So then we just divide it by the full width of the blue bar. And with any luck, if we log new progress, this should give us a percentage. We can see it's 0 at the bottom. It climbs up. And then once we get to the right, it goes to 1. So that is the percentage that we've progressed through the slider. The new value is going to be that percentage times the max minus the min. So let's go ahead and give this a max, let's say of 100. Let's give it a min of 0. And check this out. Boom. So let's go ahead and get rid of this color and the opacity. And we'll see this is starting to come together. So that's pretty cool, right? Again, there's a lot of ways you could calculate this after lots of different experimentation. I found this made the math the easiest when it's all the way to the left. There's no translation on the handle, And just using that inner bar with a little bit of kind of padding on either side was just a nice trick that just makes all of this work a lot easier. Okay, so next what we want to do is respect whatever value is set right here. So next what we wanted to do is be able to set the initial value right here. So if we start off value at 30, we can see, React is obviously going to render 30 for this div, but our slider is not responding. And if you start to make these reusable, this could be a prop to a reusable slider. If the prop changes, the drag handle should change as well. So we should definitely account for that. And to do this, we want to be able to basically manually set the position of this handle based on the value. And the way we're going to do that is with a motion value. So let's create a new motion value called handle X. This is going to be the X position for the handle. And this is going to use motion value from framer motion. Now, motion values are kind of the power underneath all of framer motion's APIs. So down here, when we do drag equals X, if we inspect this element and take a look at the styles being applied, basically when we drag this, we're setting the translate X property. That's how framer motion is implementing this. But we can also do that ourselves using X right here. So if I were to just put X 200 and refresh, we'll see changing this value also changes the position. So what we want to do is set this equal to our handle X, which is going to be a motion value that we can set and animate and all that good stuff. And we'll start this off at 0. But we can see here in the same way, if we started this off at 100, when we render 200, that's going to move it over by 200 pixels. So our job is going to be to convert the value on the scale from the min to the max to a pixel value that corresponds to that progress, to how far along the slider should be rendered. But we can't calculate that directly from the 30. We can't just look at the 30 and, if we were to move this to 30 and see 123 pixels as our transform, we can't do that before we render because we have to measure everything and calculate what that pixel value is. So we need an effect because we need this to run after we're able to measure these values. So let's add use effect, import that from React, and I'll just paste in some code and let's walk through this. So first, we're going to calculate the new progress. This is just going to be our value. Let's say 30 over the max minus the min. So this is going to be 0.3. It's going to be 30% of the way through that progress bar. Then we just need to grab the progress bar bounds again. We already have that ref. And then this is the cool part. Again, because of the way we've set this up, we just multiply our progress by the width and call handle x.set. That's going to update this motion value right here. Let's go ahead and add these dependencies, turn this back to 0, and check it out. We refresh, the handle starts at 30, and we can start dragging it. Pretty cool, right? And I can change this to 10, I can change this to 0, to 100, and now we see our slider's handle is really reactive. So it's kind of this typical data flow in React apps that we want everything to react to and respond to. And that's basically how we do it. So little effect to get that initial state or to respect any changes to the state that happen elsewhere. For example, if there was a button that set the value or something like that, this is going to take care of that. So that's pretty cool. Okay, the next feature we kind of want to add here is the background. So we want this background to fill in as we drag it. And again, if you look kind of at these examples from my Apple Music demo, you'll see what I'm talking about. The background fills in as these move. So again, I went down several different strategies here, adding new divs to try to fill them up, but I landed on a pretty sweet technique that I was really happy with. Doesn't require any extra elements. And let me show you exactly the strategy we're going to use here. So if we check out this background right here, this slider background div that's colored in gray 300. Well, it turns out if we make the background a linear gradient, I'm sure most of you have seen this before. We can use linear gradients in CSS and we can color this in. So this is 90 degrees and it's these two colors. But for each color stop in a linear gradient, you can actually define kind of the position where it ends. And so this is 10, 20 pixels, but you'll see as I increase this, more of the bar is filling up. The gradient basically doesn't start until, let's say we're at 200 pixels. But if I were to add 200 pixels to the second number, we actually get a hard stop right at 200 pixels. So this is filling up the gradient here, and then this is starting right at 200 pixels. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. If we change that value based on the handle's position, we'll look at that. It gives the impression that this part of the bar is filled up. Now there's a neat little trick here, so we don't even have to repeat this. In the CSS color spec, there's something called a color stop fix-up. And it says if this value right here is actually smaller than this value, it's kind of like illegal or it doesn't really make sense. They just go ahead and start it at the previous value. So we can just put 0 here. And now look, we can just change this and it's going to give us this nice progress. So this is going to be our strategy. We're going to come right to our background, and instead of gray 300, we should be able to style background linear gradient. Now we have this working, and we just need to calculate this pixel value based on the slider position. So we already have handle X as a motion value, and motion values update and animate outside of reactive rendering. So you might think you could do something like, just put in handle X pixels right here. But again, handle X is not a piece of React state. It's kind of an object with ways to update and set it. So you can't do this directly in your render method. However, if we grab this template string, we can actually use motion template and do exactly this. This is going to be our background. And now this is going to respond to any updates that this gets while we're using Framer Motion to animate or set this thing. So this is a pretty sweet little API right here. Use motion template. It lets you interpolate these things just like this. And now if we come down and pass in background as style, all we got to do is make this a motion.div. And check this out. We get perfect animation that's perfectly tracking our handle. Now, if we go ahead and slap an opacity of 50 on this, we'll see it's tracking the left-hand side because that's what we're setting. It'd be nice to get this right in the middle so that there's kind of no overlap there. You can't see any of that bleeding through. And so we just want to add half of the handle size to this pixel value. And again, we can't just do that right here because this needs to be just a pure motion value in these template strings. But we can create another variable called progress and use another handy API called use transform. This takes in a motion value and gives you a function that you can use to transform it. So we'll take the handle X and then we'll add half of the handle size, and then we'll use that progress right here. And check that out. It's perfectly in the middle. If we remove this opacity, we get exactly the effect that we want. So that is pretty awesome. I love that we just basically got to reuse this element right here. We didn't have to add anything. No matter how you change handle X, there's lots of ways you can go with this. You see people animating these things, doing all sorts of things with this. The background is going to be perfectly right on top of it. And again, another goal with this particular implementation of the slider was that all of this stuff we're doing is invariant to the heights here. I can change all of this stuff. The rounding doesn't get messed up. If you use another element here, it kind of gets squished sometimes, but this way it works absolutely perfectly. We can change the size of our handle to anything, and everything is just perfectly lined up. The value goes to 0 at the bottom, 100 at the top. So this is looking really good. Now, the next feature we want to add is the ability to click the bar and update the value. So again, back here, we can click on this or we can drag these. And so that's a feature you'd want to see in a slider. And for this one, I actually make a new div. You might think, well, let's just click the background here. But on some UIs, like for example, this one, if the background's really small, you actually want to add some more padding so that it's a little more forgiving. You can see here, I can kind of click above and below it and it still works. So the way I liked to do this, my favorite way to do this was go ahead and add a new div right down here below our handle. We'll call this data test slider clickable area. And let's make this absolute width full. Let's give it a height of 4. And we'll just give it a border of green 500 so we can kind of see what's going on. So there we see our new div. And all we're going to do is use on pointer down. This is from React, from the DOM. And this takes in a function with an event. And this is where we're going to write our code. So if we log the event here, we can kind of see in our console, whenever we click, we get an event. And the event gives us a page X value. And so we're going to use exactly that to see where we clicked and then basically do kind of the same conversion we did before where we turn that absolute coordinate into a percentage that we can use to update our value. So let's come back to our progress. We'll give this a height of 2, a border, and we'll make that border blue 500. And maybe we'll just comment out this background for now, so we can kind of see what's going on. All right, now let's come to pointer down and paste in some code. So if we zoom in, take a look at this. When I click right here, we want to calculate basically how far the click is from the edge of the blue bar. So let's start by getting the edge of the blue bar and the total width of the blue bar. And that's going to be from our progress bar ref. We'll get the bounding client rect, and we'll just destructure the left position and the width. So now we'll use the page X of the event. And so let's say we click right here. We'll go ahead and subtract off all of this space, just like before, so we can kind of get the position of the click relative to the left side of the progress bar. So that's going to be this position. And then our new progress is just going to be that position over the total width of the bar. So let's go ahead and log new progress. And when I click here, we should be basically at 0. And as we go up and click here about 50, we see 0.5, and up here is 100. So that looks pretty good. The new value is just going to be our progress times the max minus the min, and then we can go ahead and set value. Boom. Now we can click, and everything works great. But we can have a lot more flexibility, click the green area, and have independent control over our background. Now you'll notice the green area goes beyond our progress. So right now we can actually click and make this negative or basically above our max or below our min. So to fix this, let's just drop in a little clamp function, which we'll use to not go below our min or above our max. So when we're setting the value, let's just clamp this to our min and our max. And now even if we click past, it sticks at 100. If we click below, it goes to 0. Okay, let's get rid of kind of our debug borders here and up here. Let's bring our background back. And check that out. We can click, we can't go past it. So that's pretty cool. Now, one thing we messed up, we actually can't drag this anymore because that green rectangle that we're using, our clickable area, is on top of our handle. Let's just go ahead and add a Z10 to our handle, and that should solve that, no problem. So this is pretty awesome. This structure is basically the simplest I could come up with. The elements are in the right spot. Again, everything here is invariant to whatever we choose to make these things. We can make them height 1 or anything like that, and everything's going to work just great. Now, before we go, we got to have a little bit of fun here. Over in Apple Music, you may have noticed this small detail. First of all, the drag slider on the progress bar gets bigger when we click on it and drag it. And when we get close to these time codes, they nudge down to make room for the big slider, but if we let go or drag it, they go up. So that was such a neat little detail I picked up from looking at Apple Music on iOS really closely. And let's go ahead and implement this ourselves because this is just too cool not to. Now, first, Framer Motion has a while drag property. This is pretty cool. We can just say while drag scale 2, and we'll see that takes care of that scaling. But it doesn't scale when we just first click, and I want that. And secondly, we want whether we're dragging or pushing down on it to be in state so that we can trigger an animation on our number here. So instead of using while drag, we're going to come up to our component, create some new state called dragging, which will start as false. And then down on our handle, we'll just add some more hooks. So on drag start, we'll set dragging to true. On drag end, false. Pointer down, true. And pointer up, false. And this is going to let us animate the scale based on whether we're dragging or not. Easy as that. Isn't that cool? Framer Motion is it's really such an awesome library. So now we have our dragging in React state. We're using it to do this cool little spring animation on our handle. Let's truncate these numbers a little bit. We'll go ahead and math.floor this. And let's make this 2 digits so we can multiply that by 100th and divide. So we've got kind of to the 100th place here. And check this out. Motion.div, animate. The Y property is what we want to animate because if we just made this 30, we'll see it goes down. If we make it 0, it goes up. So if we're dragging, let's make it 30, otherwise 0. So now this goes down whenever we're dragging, but we actually don't want it to be all the time, only if we're close to the edge. Well, we've got the value in state. Let's go ahead and create a derived value called %. This is going to be value divided by max minus min. This is going to be the percentage of the way we're through. So let's just say if we're dragging and the % is less than 15, let's go ahead and nudge that thing down. Isn't that cool? Maybe 30 is a little aggressive. Make this 20. Just make a little room for it. It's just the neatest thing, isn't it? It's so easy too. And I love just how fluid it is to go between, our motion values and React state. I mean, you can trigger any of these animations with React state just like this. It keeps your app performant. It's just so easy and it's so much fun. So this is basically where I ended up with the slider. Hey there, it's Sam from the edit. I just wanted to add one more thing because we did all this work to make this really cool slider, and I just had one more idea for a quick feature we could add. So we have this clickable area, we have our sliding handle, and right here in the clickable area, when we click, we update the value, but I wanted to show you, we can also animate our handle X. This is so easy. Right after we set the value for React state, we're just going to import this animate function, go ahead and animate handle X, and we know we can calculate that if we get the new progress times the width of our progress bar, which is coming right here. So if I save this, look at that. One line of code, boom. Now we have just another little piece of animation. We'll see we can actually click outside the bounds. It kind of snaps. So if we just clamp the progress to be between 0 and 1, then both of these will be constrained. So I thought this was so neat, just one little line of code, and now we've made our slider even more polished. Okay, that's it. Back to the video. So this is basically where I ended up with the slider. It's all here, and now you should be able to go over and play with this and maybe see if you can tweak it yourself, or maybe you can make this slider reusable. You could extract it to a slider component and render it a few times. You could use an interval to animate the value, the prop, and the effect will basically respond to those changes. So you can kind of move it. You'll see over in the demo, if I hit play, the slider moves slowly and these values update. So I just love playing with this stuff. I really do. It's so much fun. And it's, when you first see this stuff, it's a little overwhelming, but the more you play with it, the more experience you get, you just start having the strategy in your head for how to solve these problems. You know when you need to reach for a motion value here, because you're going to be outside of React. You know when you need to respond to changes in React state. And again, once you're in motion value land, you're going to be comfortable with using these transforms and these motion templates to achieve the effects you want. But I was pretty happy with this. I hope you found that valuable, and maybe you can grab this code. I'm going to link it all up below and bring it into your own projects. But if you like that and you want to learn more about Framer Motion, I'm actually working on a course with my buddy Ryan. We're going to build 7-8 components that are kind of like this, go in depth into each one of them, and teach you how to make these really cool polished effects, like the kind of stuff you see in Apple products or on websites like Stripe or apps like Linear. We're looking at Things, the native Mac app that has a lot of cool animations, and Framer Motion is just so much fun to do and to learn and to get more depth with, so you can bring it into your own apps that you're working on at work. So if you're interested in that course, check the link in the description. We have a little sign-up page on my website, and you can just get on our email list, and as we build out the components, we're going to be sending little teasers there and let you know everything about that course as we build it out. Otherwise, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed that, learned a thing or two, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.